Hi guys, it's Meg. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Today we're going to be getting into a case that was actually requested, and it is insane. There's a lot going on, there's a lot of people involved, there's a lot of places where the case is held at, and there's just a lot of events, and I'm not gonna lie, as I was researching this case, I got lost a little bit myself. So without further ado, let's get into the murder of Mark Kilroy. Mark was born on March 5th of 1968 in Chicago, Illinois, to Jim Kilroy, who was a chemical engineer, and his mother, Helen Kilroy, who was a volunteer paramedic. Soon after Mark was born, the family moved to Santa Fe, Texas, which was like a small little town right outside Houston, where Mark spent 15 years of his life with his brother, Keith Kilroy. They were raised as Catholics, and his family were regular attendees to Lourdes Catholic Church. Mark was just an excellent student. He excelled at both academics and athletes as a teenager. He played baseball, basketball, and golf with his friends. He was a part of Boy Scouts. He was an honor student at the Santa Fe High School. He was a member of student council, and he was ranked 14 out of 210 students in his class. And he graduated in 1986, where he then attended Southwest Texas State University in San Marcos of Texas. He then transferred shortly after to Tarleton State University in Texas on a baseball scholarship, and he was a member of Lambda Chi Alpha fraternity. He ended up giving everything to go pre-med at University of Texas and was preparing for his MCAT. On March 10th, 1989, a few of his friends decided to go on a little spring break trip. Pretty normal for some college students who just want to get out of town, take their mind off their studies. Bradley Moore, one of Mark's very close childhood friends, decided to go pick him up, and then the two of them went to go pick up Bill Huddleston and Brent Martin, where they all four of them decided to go to South Padre Island of Texas. It was a 9-hour drive to South Padre, Texas, and they arrived just before midnight, and South Padre Island is like the it place to go for spring break in Texas. There's people from all over the U.S. attending this big party like central. There was about 1,000 students arriving when Mark and his friends arrived. There were beer sponsors staging for entertainment events. There was free movies playing, music concerts, surf simulators, opportunities to appear on TV commercials, and free phone calls, which is just so weird to me because I was born in 1999, so we always had like handheld cell phones. I mean, like I had a flip phone growing up in high school, but we still had handheld phones, so them having to like pay at like a toll phone or pay phone just to call like their parents is just so weird to me. Anyways, Mark decided to call his parents that night just to kind of check in, say that he arrived there safely. They were all good. Later that night, Mark and his friends met a group of girls, and they pretty much partied all night. The next morning, they woke up and they had a pretty good plan in mind what they wanted to do for the day, so they went to the beach and they suntanned until lunch. They went to lunch and then they went back to the beach and behind their hotel for a Miss Tan Line competition. After the event ended, they went back to their hotel, took a nap, and started planning for a trip to Mexico. As they were leaving the island, they actually met another group of girls who were also going to Mexico to party. On March 13th, they did pretty much the same thing. I did a lot more tourist stuff, went to another Miss Tan Line competition, went to like a condo party, and they headed back to Matamoros, which was like the place to be in Mexico. They had a lot of cool things to do there. So what they did was they parked on the border and then they just walked the border. Matamoros, Mexico was flooded with 15,000 tourists that day, all in the same street. Just a heads up, I'm gonna butcher all of these names, so if I say it really terribly, can you just comment below what I'm actually supposed to, like how it's supposed to be pronounced? But the street they were on was Alvaro Obregon, which was like the tourist street, very popular. Like I said, 15,000 people were on the street partying, having a good time. The sidewalks, streets, nightclubs were packed with tourists all over, kind of enjoying the very cheap, lax Mexico rules for drinking. You know, the friends kind of got separated. Some of them were hanging out with the girls that they met. Mark met a few women at the bar and he was hanging out with them until they saw him about 2 a.m. Some of his friends suggested that they go back to South Padre Island for the night and call it a night. As they were headed out, they saw Mark kind of leaning against a car talking to this girl, which was one of the girls that he met at the Miss Tan Line competition. They went in pairs. Brett and Bradley went to this restaurant near the border just to get some food, while Mark and Bill decided to walk the girl that Mark had been talking to back to her place, kind of on the same street. Bill needs to use the restroom, so he ran into a dark alley just to go pee, and when he came back out to meet back with Mark, Mark was gone. His friends searched for him for hours until 4:30 a.m. and they figured maybe he went back to the car and kind of went his own way. So when they went back to the car and they checked, he wasn't there. So then they searched a little bit more around the car, and then they hoped maybe he had just went back to South Padre Island, or maybe he took a cab and spent a night with the girl. So they decided just to go back to South Padre Island without him and wait till the next morning. The next morning, they still haven't heard from Mark, so that's when they decided to call the police. And the police did not take it very seriously. They said this happens all the time, especially on spring break. Typically, someone will just drink a lot and then wake up a few days later and just basically have this terrible hangover and didn't even know what happened because he was so drunk. So they said, don't worry, Mark will show up. But his friends were trying to tell the police that it was very unlike him to get really drunk and not remember anything or go home with a girl without contacting his friends. So they were kind of pushing the PD, saying it's not like Mark. Mark's investigation started off as a pretty normal missing persons investigation. Like I said, police didn't really take it seriously because they thought he'd show up eventually. However, more time passed by and Mark was known as 1 out of 60 people who disappeared in Matamoros in the last 3 months, which is insane that they haven't really been doing anything about the 60 people who have been missing for the past 3 months. His case drew a whole lot of attention because his uncle worked in the U.S. Customs Service. A private police task force was made for Mark's case. It got kind of confusing because some people were saying that Mark disappeared in Matamoros. Some people were saying that he disappeared in Texas. Basically, Texas and Matamoros were just trying to put the blame on each other. Matamoros, Mexico, was saying, no, he disappeared on your side, you guys need to take care of it. And Texas was saying, no, he disappeared on your side, you guys need to take care of it. They eventually concluded that Mark did disappear in Matamoros, Mexico. Mexican federal police vowed that they would help the U.S. investigators to help find Mark, and they worked together to contact informants, potential witnesses, and worked on any tips that they got about Mark. Their hunch was that Mark was involved in some kind of foul play. He was like a victim of a drug-related violence or robbery killing. They didn't really have much to work on. Obviously everyone was really drunk. A lot of people go missing and then, like I said, end up drunk. Mark was one of 60 people who disappeared, so they went to Matamoros jail to try to find, maybe he got locked up and they didn't realize that he was in jail. They ended up hiring a hypnotist, performed hypnosis on some of Mark's friends, and one of his friends, Bradley, ended up recalling something under hypnosis, saying that on the day that Mark disappeared, on the night Mark disappeared, he saw Mark, or this guy, talking to Mark, and the guy basically was like, hey, don't I know you from somewhere? And he can't remember if Mark said anything, but that's all he remembered under hypnosis. Upon this hypnosis story, they deduced that maybe Mark was kidnapped for ransom, but they didn't really believe this theory because the ransomers or the abductors didn't contact the police. So if Mark was held for ransom, the abductors would usually be like, give me this amount of money for Mark and then we'll return him, but no one had contacted them, so they believed more of the first theory they formed, which was that he was related to a drug-related incident. Mark's family went to the Rio Grande Valley where they handed out 20,000 handouts and offered $15,000 for any information on his case. They talked to the They also talked to the Tamaulipas governor, who reached out to his people of Matamoros and was asking them if anyone knew about Mark or anyone saw his face recently. Nothing really happened after this because the Mexican officials were being really sus and really slow. They were cooperating, but they were just acting really, really slow for situations where they don't really have to act slow for. So because they were acting so weird and sus, they thought maybe it had to do with police corruption, which is a real thing. On March 26, Mark's case was featured on America's Most Wanted. Many people called in for tips, but none of the tips really led to anything significant. Mark's parents went back to Santa Fe where they raised money for Mark's case to keep the investigation going, because these investigations actually do cost quite a bit of money, so they had to continuously put in their own money if the police department couldn't help out in any other way. On April 1st of 1989, the investigation starts tightening. Mexican state officials were doing routine checks on the border when they noticed a car that went straight through, not stopping for them to check out the car, and the man driving it was known as Serafin. Instead of turning on the police sirens, they decided to just follow him quietly from a distance, and Serafin ended up turning on a dirt road that led to a ranch known as Ranch Santa Elena. 30 minutes later, Seraphin left the ranch to go into the city, and while he was gone, the police decided to check out the ranch, see what was there, and upon looking at the ranch, they found cult paraphernalia and marijuana traces. Again, instead of arresting Seraphin right away, they decided to do a little bit more investigating, find a little more information, and they found that Seraphin and the ranch were tied to the Hernandez family. They began asking the people of Matamoros, who's the Hernandez family, trying to get a little bit of a vibe for who they are. On April 9th, they returned with enough information to arrest Seraphin, his uncle Alino, and other cult members known as David, Sergio, and Domingo, who was the ranch's caretaker. When they were arrested, they were really calm and very relaxed, and they separated the cult members from the ranch taker, Domingo, and they just questioned Domingo, where he revealed that the ranch had many visitors from criminal groups that were connected to Seraphin and the Hernandez family. When police showed him a picture of March, he identified him and he saw that he was at the ranch. Then they began interrogating Seraphin. Seraphin automatically confessed to killing Mark and plenty others who were killed over a 9-month period at the ranch of Santa Elena. Seraphin revealed that there were 2 leaders of the cult known as Costanzo and Sarah. He said that Costanzo was the head honcho. He was the one who ordered the killings. He believed that you could sacrifice humans in return for strength, abundance, and immunity against enforcement, like law enforcement. And they specifically killed and kidnapped Mark because Costanzo ordered for a white male. He said he killed Mark with a machete blow and buried his body in a grave at the ranch. And he agreed to show the police where exactly he buried him. He said it was going to be easy because there was a wire sticking out of the ground. And he, like I said, was very calm, very relaxed throughout this whole process. He said the wire was connected to Mark's spine so they could remove it when Mark's body decomposed. The ranch was owned by the Hernandezes, and how they got involved was basically one of the Hernandez family members died, and due to this, Seraphin and his uncle Alino kind of got closer to like ritual cult paraphernalia, and they thought maybe Costanzo could protect their family spiritually, supernaturally. This is also where Seraphin spilled all the beans. He told them what happened that night. Basically, while Mark was waiting for Bill, Mark was lured to this truck that had Seraphin and some other cult members, and they were like, oh, we need your help, come over here. And so as Mark was approaching the truck, 2 men, Seraphin and Alino, grabbed Mark and threw him in the truck. Mark actually escaped, and he was running towards the border as fast as he could, but he was met with another cult member truck, and they pulled up to him and threw him in their truck. Mark was then subdued and handcuffed, and they took him to the ranch. They left Mark in the car overnight, and that's when the caretaker, Domingo, found him in the truck, and he felt really bad for him. He was actually like sort of a nice guy, and he gave him some food and some water. He didn't quite know what they were going to do with Mark, but he just knew he couldn't really touch anything. He couldn't mess with anything. 12 hours after the kidnapping, Costanzo ordered the men to wrap Mark's face and his mouth with duct tape, and they walked him through the field to a cabin while Mark's arms were still tied behind his back. The entire night, Mark was tortured and sodomized and sexually assaulted. He was then led into a field where Costanzo killed him with a machete and by chopping the back of his neck with a machete. They cut a hole in his head to remove his brain, which were then boiled in a nganga, which was like an African metal pot that he used to boil human and animal remains. Mark's legs were cut off above the knee so that they could make burial easier, and they also attached the metal wire to Mark's spine so that when Mark's body decomposed, they could pull the spine out and use it as a necklace. How freaking weird and insane is this? On April 11th, they brought Seraphin back to the ranch to show them where Mark's body was buried. And Mark's body was buried, yes, with a wire sticking out of the ground, but also kind of like a mound over where he was buried. And upon seeing where Mark was buried, they looked across the ranch and they saw 15 other mounds just like this. And they forced the men at gunpoint to unbury all of these bodies, where they totaled and rallied up 15 bodies. The bodies that were found were killed over a period of 9 months, and they were all males. And they also seized 243 pounds of marijuana, 108 grams of cocaine, and 12 firearms, as well as 11 vehicles. They found human brains, goat heads, chicken feet, turtle remains, horse feet, and coins mixed in animal blood. On April 9th, there was an informal press conference where 250 journalists arrived, and one of the detainees, Alino, which was Serafin's cousin, said he was the executioner in the cult, and that Constanzo was the main person who killed Mark, but there was other people involved. He also turned around and showed the scars that members needed to undergo in order to be part of the cult, and they were like arrow-like scars on his back. We'll get into this a little bit more later, but basically the Mexican police knew a little bit about the ranch. They knew that it was sus. They knew that there was some weird things going on there, but they didn't check it out because of the cult paraphernalia and like their religious values, and that they're kind of like scared in some ways to check it out because they knew it was like satanic. And so it takes, like, I'm just thinking, an American person to be killed in order for them to find these 15 bodies. So let's get into these cult leaders. Adolfo Constanzo was born in Miami, Florida in 1962, and his father died pretty early on when he was an infant, and his mother relocated to Puerto Rico, where his mother remarried his stepfather, who also died and left him a very large inheritance. And his mother remarried once again to his stepfather at the time, who was involved in drug trafficking, and his stepfather taught him at a very early age he should let non-believers kill themselves with drugs while he could benefit from their foolishness. And he pretty much kept that saying throughout his entire life. His mother also believed that he had some psychic abilities, so she decided to introduce him to Palo Mayombre, which was like this Afro-Caribbean religion where they did animal sacrifices. So early on, both his parents and stepfathers did not have that great of an influence on him. He started off as a palero, which was like level 1 of the religion. He didn't really do much. He just kind of looked into the religion. He ended up making his way up to the priest, which he started doing tarot card readings and eventually started following a cult. Constanzo was known to have really good charisma. He was good looking, handsome. He was actually a male model at one point and had psychic talent, and thus he mingled really well with upper class. This was also one thing you had to have to be part of the cult. Like, you have to have this sort of, like I said, charisma, good looking, in order to be a certain level of the cult. He ended up getting a reputation for predicting the future and offered ritual cleansing to drug dealers and police. So police went to him for some ritual cleansing, which, like I said before, that there might have been some police corruption. They might have known Constanzo was doing this, but they got so much ritual cleansing out of him that they decided to say nothing. The next cult leader was Sarah Aldrete, who was an honor student at Texas University, where she was described as an honor student, really smart, really pretty normal. Her boyfriend was a drug dealer and was linked to the Hernandez family, which, as we know, own the ranch Santa Elena. Because her boyfriend was linked to the Hernandez family, Constanzo knew of her and was interested in making her kind of part of the cult. In 1987, she met Constanzo and became the cult's main recruiter. What she would do was recruit men mainly because she was really beautiful and she was known to like lure them in because of her beauty. And so she would force them to watch the 1987 movie The Believers, which was about a cult based in New York and how they would do like animal sacrifices and human sacrifices, and they would benefit from it. So she basically had them watch this movie over and over and over again until it was ingrained in their mind and memory and whatever, and they would want to do this as well. Her teachers and her students at Texas University said that she was pretty normal, like I said, so it was really weird to find out she was part of a cult. The only thing out of the blue was that they said she wore a lot of black. Basically, police determined that the border between Matamoros and Texas kind of gave her the ability to live 2 lives. So in Matamoros, she was a cult leader / recruiter, crazy with drug dealers and everything. And then in Texas, she was this honor student, really great, really normal. And they actually looked into her a little bit more and found out she had a multiple persons disorder because of her 2 different lives. On April 13th, they had a memorial service for Mark at Our Lady of Lourdes Catholic Church, where many people attended and hung yellow ribbons outside the church on the trees. His friends were really regretful and said that they wish they never even went to Mexico and they just stayed in Texas for their spring break. Mark's family handled the situation very well. His father was not mad at the killers. He actually hoped that when they passed and when they died, they would go to heaven, as if they would go to heaven, but they would go to heaven and they could apologize to Mark in person in heaven. And his mother was sad, but she asked everyone at the memorial to just pray for the killers and pray, I guess, for their own sanity. But they handled the situation really well. On March 15th, Mark's family went with the president, George Bush, at the time, and basically told him, for every drug consumer, there's a victim who is hurt and suffers from their addiction. And the president didn't really tell them exactly what he'd do to help prevent like drug addiction and drug use, but they felt like after they came out of the meeting with the president that he had a good place where he wanted to work forward and move forward from drug addiction. Basically, they said they were satisfied with the government and how they were going to take measures to move forward with drug prevention. 2 weeks after they found Mark's body, they went back to the ranch to burn it down. But before they did that, Mexican police took a curandero, which was like a folk healer, and they cleansed the place with like holy water first before burning it down. And the American police were kind of just like, what the heck's going on? Like, they just let them do their thing. They let them, they didn't even take pictures of the scene before burning it down. They just thought it was like bad luck. And they cleansed the place without taking pictures, and then they burned it down. And the American police were just like, they didn't get involved, but they were just like standing there like, what the heck? They said that they knew the ranch meant a lot to Constanzo and that burning it to the ground would make him go insane. And they said it would hit him where it hurts. And the next morning when Constanzo found out about them burning down the ranch, went into rage on national television. The day the bodies were found, Constanzo and a few other cult members, including Sarah, fled, and the manhunt for Constanzo and Sarah and the other cult members began. The manhunt is very long and tedious, and I won't get too much into it, but basically they went from Illinois to Rio Grande Valley to New Mexico and Texas to try to find Constanzo and the others. They raided Sarah's house, where she obviously wasn't there, but they found blood all over the house, like inside the house, and a lot of cult paraphernalia, of course. On April 17th, Serafin and a few others were arrested in Houston. On the same day in Mexico, they raided one of Constanzo's many properties because he was rich as a drug dealer. And they found Maria Rodriguez, who was one of Constanzo's lovers and henchmen. After questioning the people of Mexico City about where they think Constanzo might have went, they thought he went to this place, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce it, where they talked to some people around the area. They talked to a shoemaker who said that he saw someone who matched Sarah's description, and they stuck around the city a little bit more to kind of scope out the place, where they saw someone buying a lot of groceries. What a weird thing to notice. But they saw this person buying a whole lot of groceries, and they followed him for like a week. And they found out this guy was buying groceries for Constanzo, and his name was De Leon. On May 6th of 1989, the police surrounded the building, and Constanzo saw this, and he basically started open firing and throwing gold coins at the police. If I was the police, I would just be like... Anyways, he basically ran out of ammo and turned around and told De Leon, his grocery guy, to kill him and one of the other cult members there. And De Leon was like, no, I'm not going to do that. But then Constanzo was like, you are going to go to hell, and you're going to get punished in hell if you don't kill me. So then De Leon killed him and the other cult member. Sarah then ran out from the place they were hiding out, yelling, Constanzo's dead, freaking out hysterically. De Leon then confessed to participating in the murder of Mark, but said that Constanzo was mainly the person who did all the killings, especially Mark's. Sarah denied any participation in the killings and said she didn't even know about the killings until she heard about it on national television, which I don't believe at all. She said that she wasn't even an official member of the cult, and she barely went through initiation like the other men who had the scars on their back. She didn't have those. She said that they said women couldn't be there when they were killing people, so she kind of like waited outside the barn, but I feel like you might hear someone scream while they're being killed. So she wasn't there. She didn't participate in the killings, but I'm pretty sure knew about it. She's not innocent. In 1990, De Leon was sentenced to 30 years in prison for killing Constanzo and the other cult member. Domingo, the caretaker, was also put in prison but was released in December 11th, 1990 with a bail of only $500. On May 3rd of 1994, Sarah was sentenced to 62 years in prison, which I just don't think is enough. And other cult members such as Alino, Seraphin, and some others were sentenced to 67 years in prison, which I still don't think is enough. Basically, how they added it up was homicide or multiple homicide was 31 years. Possession of narcotics was 12 years. Involvement of an organized crime was 5 years. Police impersonation was 2 years. Illegal body discretion was 2 years. And illegal possession of firearms was 10 years. And lastly, illegal possession of weapons for Mexican armed forces was another 5 years, like I said. I mean, I know it's Mexican rules and that's how they organize and jail up their people. But from cases I've seen, there's a lot more sentences. Like our last case with the Gonzalez family, Seth received 3 lifetime years in prison, which is basically like his entire life in prison for the murder of 3 people. And these people murdered over 15, probably more. And they are getting 67 years in prison. Anyway, that's all I have on today's case. If you're new here, we also covered the Gonzalez family murders as well as the Santa Claus killer. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys for our next case. Bye!